Why are we afraid? Is there something out there? Do unknown things live among us? For centuries, our ancestors feared the dark. So do monsters and the supernatural exist? Take the eerie case of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. What was the strange flying thing that was seen there, known as Mothman? It was gray in color, had red glowing eyes, and a 10-foot wingspan. In this town of Point Pleasant, residents say something used to attack motorists at night along this road that passed a government complex. Whatever it was, it eventually disappeared. But researchers now return to the abandoned buildings where the sightings originally took place.
They said that somebody actually said they seen the Mothman up on top of the bridge.
I spend some of my time doing research into unusual phenomena.
Join in a search for clues from Point Pleasant to ancient legends for the creature known as Mothman.
A lot of places have good ghost stories and legends, but Point Pleasant's a little different. West Virginia itself is steeped in folklore and legends and ghost stories. You know, we all like to think that maybe there's another world out there. You know, you get the images of like lonely woods, abandoned roads, unseen things out there. There's been stacks and stacks of books written about West Virginia folklore. So maybe there's something out there that still gets people's attention.
Cecil Lawson researches cases of the unexplained. The Mothman is one of the scariest and most well-documented cases. So the Special Investigations Team wanted to go back 30 years after the events took place and recreate the mystery.
When I've been out there investigating these cases, I found out that, for the most part, a lot of these cases are hoaxes, frauds, media hype, that sort of thing. A lot of times you'll run into a case and there'll be a lot of people who will talk and fill you up with anything you want to know about it. But when you start checking out things, when you start doing the hard research, getting to the core of things, you find out that there's not that much there. However, in some cases, you're going to find something that will surprise you a lot of times.
Point Pleasant is in Mason County, West Virginia, bordering with Ohio. Several bridges span the Ohio River right across from Gallipolis, Ohio. In 1966 and 67, a series of strange stories about winged creatures flowed from Point Pleasant, all seeming to be connected with an old abandoned explosives factory a few miles outside of town. On November 15th, around midnight, a local couple saw the Mothman for the first time in a place known as the TNT area. the echoes of a factory long since abandoned. Explosives for World War II were manufactured here. These large structures appear all over the TNT area. With its desolate bunkers and miles of peculiar landscapes, the TNT plant has all the elements to inspire a horror story.
The first reported sighting of Mothman took place in mid-November 1966. Two couples were riding around in a 57 Chevy in the McClintock Wildlife Reserve. Now, this is near the old TNT plant. When they passed the old TNT plant, they saw the creature, a bird-like humanoid with glowing red eyes. They took off. They were scared. The bird flew very close over top of them, and it followed them till they got to the main highway. They were still scared, and they went back into town. They returned. They got their courage back and headed back to the wildlife reserve area. But on their way back there, on the main highway, they ran into it again. But this time, it took off across a field flying and wasn't seen again until the next night.
The original witnesses described the entity as being more bird-like than moth-like. It was known as the bird around Point Pleasant, getting the name Mothman, probably because of its gray color. The report the next day said the couples hadn't been drinking and gave the description of a man-sized monster that had wings folded over its back, then flew after their car at around 100 miles an hour. By the time they reached the town limits, the Birdman flew away as if chasing them out of the TNT area. The witnesses in the car were panicking, but all agreed on the same basic description of a man with wings, but no one could remember what its face looked like. The West Virginia University suggested that the sightings were of a sandhill crane. The rare crane is gray and has a large wing spread, but it is not aggressive like the Mothman reports. The abandoned factory is only a few yards from a bird sanctuary in the McClintock Wildlife Reserve. If there was any exaggeration to the actual size of the creature, it is possible it could have been a sandhill crane. But report after report followed, with the Mothman appearing and chasing its victims with its hypnotic red eyes. It is now known that the factory was used as a site to store toxic chemicals, including large amounts of asbestos. The site was once a vast complex of warehouses, boiler rooms, and underground tunnels that are now sealed. Even in the 60s, it was a wasteland. This is all that remains today, barren, but for the huge concrete structures, storage buildings, and deep wells. At the time of the encounter, the old factory was used as a local lover's lane for the teenagers of Point Pleasant. The two couples' story appeared in several newspapers and books of the time. But Mrs. Linda Scarberry, one of the few witnesses who still lives in Point Pleasant, will no longer talk about the sighting. Sam Somerville of Point Pleasant did not see any of the phenomenon himself, but he was a resident at the time and remembers the story of Mothman chasing the couple's car vividly.
He had a 57 Chevy, and it was a hot car. And I seen the scratch marks on top of it where the bird supposedly came down and scratched it and all that. But I don't see how any bird could outran that car. Outflew it or whatever.
The second sighting took place less than 24 hours later at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Thomas, which is located near to the TNT area north of the White Church Road. Around 9 p.m., the Wamsleys and the Thomases left the house and saw the creature lying on the road behind their car. Terrified, they ran back into the house and called the police, who were at that time continuing their search of the abandoned factory for the creature. They saw it again when they stepped back outside. It peered at them from behind a pile of bricks and then flew away by shooting straight up like a rocket. As it turns out, Mrs. Thomas claimed to have had visions of the Mothman before the first reports. Mrs. Thomas said that many of her visions would come true, and the vision of Mothman foretold its coming. Many have tried to explain away the Mothman, but there may have been other sightings. Famous West Virginia UFO investigator Gray Barker describes in his book, The Silver Bridge, various encounters with UFOs and lights in the sky around Point Pleasant, and prophecies of a disaster by local psychics. A host of strange people wearing black descended upon the town, driving unusual black cars, and with their threatening personalities, they questioned people about UFOs, and sometimes posed as government agents, all as part of a seeming quest for the Mothman. It is possible that urban legends and folk beliefs influence eyewitness reports. The Mothman case has a lot in common with other modern legends and UFO encounters. Much strange lore has grown up around certain areas around the country. UFOs and modern legends are very similar to ghost mythology and the tales told by the early settlers and the ancient inhabitants of the land. Lights in the sky, phantom visitors lurking outside asking strange questions, and the repeated occurrence of unusual sightings are all elements in these reports over the years. There is a great tradition of winged, unnatural monsters appearing in our mythic past. All cultures contain legends of flying oddities. In Native American mythology, there is the Thunderbird and the Piasa bird, fearsome flying monsters similar to dragons in European myths. Could there be some truth to ancient legends? The cases of Point Pleasant are beyond strange, but there are other similar cases of unknown visitors on file. In London, England, in the late 1800s, certain areas of London were haunted by a flying man known as Spring-Heel Jack. Those who saw him closely described a glowing-eyed phantom with dark wings. It was often seen floating into courtyards or chasing travelers. It got the name Spring-Heel from its ability to jump from roof to roof and clear fences and walls with ease. The Spring-Heel was more brazen than most unknown creatures. It attacked police and tried to abduct people. All efforts to shoot or capture it failed. The Spring-Heel Jack case continued for a few years and then dropped off to nothing. But he was still blamed for the disappearances of people and animals. The specter was said to have a hypnotic eye glow that entranced witnesses. Then it would paralyze them. Many witnesses in Point Pleasant complained of an aura of paralyzing fear when face to face with the Mothman. Sightings of strange things spread beyond the TNT plant. More and more people began seeing flying creatures around Point Pleasant. Catherine Beaver of Mason County encountered a huge bird that flew at the windshield of her car, and a massive gust of wind shook the car as it passed over. The winged man made a daylight appearance to Thomas Urey, a salesman from Clarksburg. Traveling along the Ohio River in Mason County, he said a monstrous 6-foot-tall entity flew off from the side of the road and chased his vehicle at treetop level. He said the monster was brown and gray in color, but the eyes were not luminous like the other reports. The creature easily kept up with him, he said, but then it finally flew away. Many Mason Countyans believe that there was a connection between the Mothman reports and the TNT plant where it was first seen. Sightseers and investigators drove to the old factory searching for evidence that the new legend really did exist.
Less than a month after the initial sightings, several people, including those who saw Mothman, claimed to have unusual visitations from what came to be called men in black. The reports consisted of residents being stalked by people with strange accents. There were prowlers out at night, and during the day, men in dark suits showed up, sometimes posing as salesmen or claiming to be working for a government they would not identify. Many witnesses of Mothman and other unexplained occurrences were soon harassed by these strangers with phone calls and ominously implied threats about not reporting the sightings. On several occasions, people reported being run off the road by large black cars at night, the same cars being used by the men in black during the day. Dark visitors like the ones that arrived during the West Virginia case have been seen in other places over the years, almost always following in the wake of UFO sightings and alien visitations. The main peculiarity of these men in black was their ability to have a hypnotic effect on those who talked to them. Witnesses explained a cold, irrational fear that made them unable to follow or take action against the intruders. The men in black of Point Pleasant sound similar to a mysterious person that was reported a few decades before in Mattoon, Illinois. In 1944, several unsuspecting people of the town of Mattoon complained of an overpowering chemical smell that immobilized them in their beds at night. It was an extremely hot summer, and the residents of Mattoon kept their windows open at night to keep cool. Some witnesses said they were awakened during the night by a sickening gas and could see a figure dressed in black peering through the windows. It appeared to have a type of pumping equipment. They were numb and unable to move until the figure was gone. Those who persisted to leave their windows open at night were often visited by the gasser. Apparently, the victims were afflicted with hideous side effects from the gas, but were not permanently harmed. The purpose of the assaults remains unexplained, and the culprit was never identified. After the summer ended, the attack stopped, and the gasser of Mattoon vanished. The men in black type entities have embedded themselves permanently in UFO lore in the cases of the unexplained. Some believed at the time that there was a link between the appearances of the men in black in Point Pleasant and the Mothman.
I spent some of my time doing research into unusual phenomena, and when I came across the West Virginia case, I became very interested in it, and I decided I need to go there and do more research because this turned out to be one of the more unusual and more interesting cases that I've come across.
Special investigations discovered that the Mothman is rarely discussed these days in Point Pleasant. But in 1966 and 67, there were many unusual events in the surrounding area. Reports of winged beings occurred all around the Ohio River that year. Creatures matching the description of Mothman were seen from Morgantown, West Virginia, all the way to Maysville, Kentucky, the same month that the Mothman was seen in the TNT plant. Other sightings like the Mothman are on record. There is a rumor about an elderly man and woman traveling in Mason County that witnessed a luminous white bird with human-like features flying across the road. The man and woman were deeply religious and assumed it was an angel flying as a symbol of the end of the world.
This case reminds me a lot of those scary stories that everybody hears about the monster outside of town, or the scary thing at Lover's Lane, or the ghost on the road. Every unexplained case is made up of all kinds of phenomena. Usually, the wackier the case, the more interesting it is to investigate. You know, if people feel something's important enough to believe in, then they really need to look into it more closely. They need to get to the facts. But even though it's more fun to believe whatever you see or hear.
The creature's appearances centered around the old plant outside of town. Residents say many investigators of the unexplained still come to the plant, hoping that something unusual will happen. Special investigations went there not just to search for the creature, but to document the stories behind the area.
Most of the early reports are more clear, more to the point, and probably less likely to be hoaxes. They took place outside of Point Pleasant on Route 62 and on Camp Conley Road, which runs almost parallel to the TNT area and the main highway. Also, the creature was seen several times between the McClintock Wildlife Area and the National Guard post that joins the main road. The place itself is strange, and I've had second thoughts about staying here at night, knowing what I know about its background and its reputation. It's kind of scary to think that some people will drive by this place and never know what happened here. I think it's really exciting to investigate these kinds of cases because we really don't have that primitive fear in our day-to-day lives anymore. We've lost touch with the myths, the mysterious places. We don't have the legends about heroes and monsters anymore. Looking into these cases kind of puts you back in touch with all that again. We all like to hear stories about the macabre and the mysterious. And West Virginia has always been a good place for this. A lot of lonely roads, strange landscapes, lonely mountain ranges. All that works together to create a weird atmosphere. It's possible, just from the sheer volume of strange sightings in Point Pleasant, that something did happen. Years ago, a lot of people.
A search of the plant did not reveal the creature. Cecil Lawson says that although he has not seen any phenomenon himself, most people have their own unique individual beliefs about the strange and unexplored world around us.
Now, at the time of the Point Pleasant case, there was a lot of UFO activity in the Ohio Valley region. And that's what makes this case so interesting. Just thinking about whether there's a connection between the creature sightings, the UFOs, and the men in black. Creature sightings are often reported with UFOs. Now, there are a lot of similarities between the phenomena of today and legends from over the centuries. With UFOs, it's like in the Middle Ages, when people believed in elves, and you always heard about the little people that were often associated with mysterious things called ghost lights. The alien abductions of today are in fact similar to Celtic mythology. The early settlers who came to the Appalachians held a common belief that encounters with owls and other bird-like creatures foretold disaster. In many cases, such encounters had specific meanings to the people they appeared to. Point Pleasant is such a fascinating place. UFOs, creature sightings, there's even a curse. There's this tale about the curse of Chief Cornstalk, who was a Shawnee Indian chief who was murdered in Point Pleasant in the late 1700s. It's said that before he died, he placed a curse on the region that would affect it for generations to come.
The Mothman sightings stopped in 1967, after a whole year of odd encounters. But the mystery surrounding the creature did not end. This is the actual site of a disastrous bridge collapse in 1967. The bridge collapsed into the Ohio River at Point Pleasant under the weight of heavy traffic. It was built in the 1920s and was known as the Silver Bridge. Many cars plunged into the water with a death toll of 36 people. Only a few days after the accident, stories about another encounter with Mothman began to surface.
66 or 67. They tried to say the Silver Bridge was caused to fall by Mothman there briefly. You know, they said that somebody actually said they seen the Mothman up on top of the bridge. I don't know who was the person that said that exactly, but there was a rumor going around that somebody said they seen him up there.
The trail in this case is cold. This happened around 30 years ago. A couple of books were written about it, and then it was just dropped. Nobody ever did anything else about it.
But the main thing is not whether these stories are true, but what these encounters are telling us. That you shouldn't be out late at night. That we should pay more attention to what's going on around us. That we should get interested in religion.
Many people all over the world claim to have witnessed beings that are not known to science. There are many theories about the origins of these phenomenon, but the fascination with mysterious things and places will always be there.